Welcome to our podcast. Today we're talking with Leah and we're speaking about mental health. It's quite a topic these days. Most organizations are considering that and trying to make adjustments to their work environment. Leah, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. Leah, as I mentioned, mental health is very much a topic in today's environment. We're seeing so much change taking place. There's so much stress in the organizational environment. Part of it's from change. Part of it's from the natural kind of work environment of the deadlines and the people. Some people bring issues with themselves into the work environment. They may have things going on in their own personal realm, and these tend to mix together with the stress inherent in an organization plus what they're doing outside. And I'm wondering what it is that you're seeing out there in terms of the mental health issues, particularly those individuals trying to cope with it in a work environment.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, the work environment is increasingly getting more and more stressful, and a lot of it is, there's a lot more expectation and time that is required for people to put into their work. People are staying at work longer, later. It's also a big thing that people are not turning work off when they go home. So it's there is more and more mental health issues within the workplace, and and I think now there is a huge call for employers to start looking at that and providing some resources and outlets for people to help manage that, because it is becoming significantly more prevalent as time goes on, and I think a lot of it has to do with just our just the way society is going today, with the accessibility of technology and the fact that you can bring your work anywhere you want. So it's harder to just disconnect and know when to stop.
Yes, absolutely. Back in the day, people would quit at 5 and they'd be able to turn it off and go home. Maybe they might bring a briefcase of things with them to work on at home, but primarily that real-time connection was not there. So we're seeing this blurring between organizational and personal time. Hopefully organizations still don't measure the personal versus organizational time that they used to do in the old days, in which people had to work for particular kinds of hours, but there's much more give and take in terms of juggling personal and organizational priorities. Are you seeing that in the organizational environment, that there's more fluid understanding of how we take care of our priorities?
Minimally. I think people are starting, and employees are starting to look at that and starting to look into that, of how we manage our priorities and having that work-life balance. I still feel there's a lot that still needs to be done in the work environment to allow for and accommodate for that. And again, I think a lot of it is that because of our technology accessibility, it's we do become more accessible. It's the emails. I mean, you may have systems in place at work, and many work environments do. They'll have, they'll allow them to, finish at 5, or maybe take some time off, or maybe work from home. But on the other end of that is because you are accessible by text, by Zoom conference, by email, by all different social media streams. The moment that someone sends off a message at work, it's now become ingrained that our natural instinct is to, when we hear that ding, that we need to respond, right? And I think it's a lot. I think it's just going to be a lot of education on both ends of knowing when to respond, when you don't need to respond, and accepting that responses don't need to be immediate all the time. And so it is becoming, employers are allowing for that flow and transition of work-life balance, but I think we have to kind of step up that the level for that and the allowance for that a little bit faster, because technology grows exponentially, like, and so quickly, and at rapid speeds. And so our mental health is also being affected in rapid speeds, and therefore we have to have those measures in place to accommodate for that at those speeds.
Yeah, what are some of those measures in place that you mentioned? Traditionally, we've had vacation time, we've had sick time. Are you starting to see more time or benefits focused around de-stressing or decompressing, or where somebody can, on a spontaneous basis, access these benefits just to reduce the level of stress that they may have, or be able to deal with the underlying causes themselves? And the underlying causes can be quite a myriad of causes. There can be things that they're bringing from their own outside life. There can be things in the organization around its culture, its leadership, its time pressures, its rate of change and learning. So there's many different underlying causes which can impact an individual. And I'm wondering, what is it that organizations are doing to either provide that de-stressing benefit or focus on some of these underlying causes?
There are some resources and measures employers are putting into place, and I've known some companies will put in extra breaks or allow for extra breaks during the day if you need to go out and just sort of clear your head. A lot of companies are putting in different things to do at lunch. So like a yoga classes at lunch that they'll provide for their employees, or a meditation class at lunch that they'll provide for their employees, just so that they can take those moments of break to kind of quiet their minds and regroup and refocus. There's a lot more companies that are allowing for work at home, which often can help if you're having a really rough day. And like you said, there are so many things that are factors in someone's mental state, whether it be personal, work life, anything. So they're allowing for work at home a little bit more. There's more vacation times and sick times that employers are allowing for. So there are a lot of those measures are starting to be put into place. Also, employee assistance programs, I believe most companies now have available to their employees, where they can access therapists, counselors, coaches, to help them if there are any moments that they need that little bit of extra help. So these are some of the things that I know of that people are putting into place, and companies are now starting to put into place, because they do recognize that this is becoming an issue, and people are needing a little bit more help with their mental state and keeping that positive frame of mind and that good work environment. So and there's many other things that companies can do as well, but these are some of the things that I know of.
Leah, we've talked in terms of the organizational side. What about on the individual side? The individual is the person that maybe best understands all the stresses that they're under. They may not understand the best way to change their situation, but they may be able to identify the stress sources. But maybe they're the ones that can take a proactive role in changing. So if we change the conversation to the individual, what is it that the individuals should be doing to better identify, initiate programs or activities that will change their situation?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this will be on the individual, because an employer is not going to know the mental state of an individual unless it's brought to their attention. So it is a lot on the individual to start being proactive in their own health and well-being. And so there are things that they can do. If you recognize that you're stressed out in a job. And there's little things and signs that you can start looking at. You know, if you feel sick every morning getting up because you just hate the idea of going to work, you know that you're at a stress level, at a high stress level, and there's something that needs to shift or change within your job. If there are moments in the day that you can't breathe or you just are shutting down, you know, start to recognize these things. But then there are things that an individual can start doing to help themselves. And sometimes it's the smallest things of just taking that extra break and going out for a 5-minute walk in fresh air and getting a different scene. It could be even just stretching at your desk. Like sometimes it's just small movements that can kind of reshift your mind, stretch out your body, relax you a little bit. It could be that maybe you just need to talk about something else for a few minutes with someone else, and you know, and be open to asking. And that's the biggest thing I would think that individuals in a workplace can do is ask, because unless nobody's going to know what frame of mind you're in. And so you have to ask for it. And if you ask for it, people are generally pretty open to being okay, especially when it comes to mental state, because it's a hot topic right now. And so employers are very aware of you know, accommodating their employees' mental state. And so if you ask and just say, hey, I need a break because I need to clear my head, I'm kind of shutting down here, or I'm not feeling at my full capacity. Like I just need, and go and do, so it's even just small little things that you can start doing for yourself. But the biggest thing is you have to ask. If you're in that leadership position and you're feeling that mental strain and stress at work, then you yourself can start doing those small things. And when you start recognizing as a leader, these are things that you're doing to help yourself, it's something that maybe you can look at then, that maybe you can turn that into things that you can offer your employees as well.
And that taking the initiative doesn't necessarily need to be, I imagine, just for the executives of the organization, but anyone can take that step. They can either be an influencer or a role model, or they can be the one that voices the concerns that others may not be. So I imagine that when you're giving that kind of advice, that you're really suggesting that anyone can step forward and take that first initial steps. And I was kind of perplexed when you were talking back about maybe there's still some stigma around mental health, and you were saying that it's much more topical, people are much more aware of it, and we need to have that conversation. Because I'm thinking in terms of, if somebody walked into the lunchroom and they were injured in some way, they had fallen down, maybe they had received a wound or an injury, everyone in the lunchroom would probably try and help. And
yeah, absolutely.
So if someone has a wound that's inside their head, then we should naturally assume that everyone would want to help in the same way. So how can we continue this awareness program out there? So we are reaching a point in which mental health is an awareness. People are aware of it, but how do we take the next step and make it so that it's as common an issue to help with, if somebody walked in and they had done an injury to themselves, either in a mechanical environment or they'd simply fallen down some steps, we should see the same kind of response on behalf of everyone when they see that. How do we get to that point?
I think a lot of that comes from, like I said, asking and talking about it, and sharing stories. And share your stories, and it's actually creating that environment of vulnerability where you allow for people to be open about it. And because the more it gets spoken of, the more it gets shared, the stigma becomes less and less. So then it does become something that people are, can recognize and can connect with and be like, oh yeah, okay, you know what? She's having a hard time today. she just needs a break. Like, and everyone in that environment will be okay to be like, oh yeah, you know what, she just needs a break. And often people will be around to help, help cover her workload in that moment, or help even just to go and sit and talk or anything. So I think it's a lot of just continue to be very open about it. And it does take some vulnerability, definitely, because it's not an easy thing to say right now that, you know what, I'm just not, mentally, I'm not really at full capacity. Mentally, I just can't think clearly right now. I just have a lot on my mind, and I need a breather. And the funny thing is that almost every single other person around you is probably experiencing the same thing. And so it just takes a few individuals to just continue to be open. And it's amazing how everyone else then will start to connect with it, because it's such a common thing, especially in the workplace, where people are going to feel stresses. And everyone has life stresses, everyone has family stresses, everyone has work stresses. And so the more open you are about it, and bring stories to connect. So, if you're in the lunchroom, and instead of having the gossip session at lunch, which happens in every workplace, you can turn it into something where you actually can be vulnerable with someone and say, you know what, I'm struggling today, and this is why. And a lot of the time, people are apt to help and be like, oh, okay, are you okay? What can I do? Or maybe you should go and talk to someone, or maybe you should tell our supervisor. And even if you are the executives in that, join your staff, like, be open about it. Come in and let them know, you know what, I'm having a bit of a rough day. I'm not functioning well mentally. I'm struggling with this a little bit. Be open to your staff too, to say, hey, you know what, I need a little bit of help. Can somebody suggest something? And because as leaders, I think it's really important, especially as leaders, that you become vulnerable to your staff in some ways at some times. Not that you have to disclose everything, but it starts to create that environment where it then becomes very open, very common, so that the stigma is gone and people can get the help that they need. It creates that great work environment that we all talk about and crave, but we have yet to attain.
Leah, you've given us some good takeaways for what organizations can do to help change the situation, as well as what individuals who may be suffering from stress or mental health issues can do to change. And you had just alluded to those that may be more in a bystander role or more participant role, or people who might just happen to be there, those that are coming to help. Maybe there's some takeaways that we can get in terms of what they should be doing, because I'm thinking in terms of, back to the analogy, if someone has a physical injury, one could take a first aid course and know how to put a Band-Aid on and do simple treatments. But mental health is a lot more complex. And you had suggested that people who are with someone that may need help could suggest, refer them to professionally trained help, or just be a listener to that person's issues. Is that the extent of what a person should do? Is this such a complex topic that we as bystanders, or we as somebody who might see an issue, should just either refer or just listen? Or is there something else that we can do when we know somebody is suffering either from an overload of stress or a chronic mental health issue?
No, it's not tied to just one or two things. People can do an array of things. And like I said, sure, depending on what is happening with a certain individual who is having that stressful moment or that time, maybe a referral is necessary. Sometimes it could just be that they just need someone to listen and they just need to vent it out. Or it could be something that, as a bystander, you're listening. It could be something that maybe they can suggest, hey, let's go on a break, or can I help you with some of your work? Or, depending on what the need is, maybe as a bystander, you can then approach your supervisors or managers and suggest things, maybe on behalf of someone, because sometimes when you're in those emotional mental states, it's hard for you to think clearly, to know what to do next. So it could be, that colleague of yours who can then advocate for you. So there are those things that, it could be just that let's go take a walk together, and simple little things and it could be things that may be outside of work. There's the classic, hey, let's go for drinks. And sometimes that's it. Sometimes you just need a friend at work, and to formulate some type of friendships at work. So, hey, let's just go for a drink, or let's go grab a bite to eat after work. There's other things that bystanders then can do, and it just in some simple forms as well, of just providing themselves, to someone in the sense of, hey, I'm here. And it could just be as simple as that. I'm here if ever you need me, for whatever reasons you might need me.
Sounds like a good ending note, Leah, and thank you for joining us today on this important topic around mental health.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And yeah, this is a topic we could go on for hours about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.